The call came at 4:37 p.m. on Christmas Eve. I remember checking my watch, a Hamilton that Sarah had given me on our 30th anniversary, just 6 months before cancer took her. The leather strap was worn now, but I couldn't bring myself to replace it. Some things are meant to show their age. Dad. My son Michael's voice was tight, controlled. I recognized that tone immediately, the one he used when trying to sound reasonable while barely containing his frustration. About tonight. I stood in my kitchen, looking out at the snow falling gently in my backyard. The Christmas lights I'd strung along the fence last weekend twinkled through the white flurries. I'd spent the morning preparing the prime rib roast Michael had always loved, using Sarah's recipe. The dining room table was already set with the good china, the set we'd received as a wedding gift 43 years ago. I was thinking of heading over around 6, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I've got the roast ready to go. Just need to put it in the oven when I get there. Emma still likes it medium rare, right? The silence stretched a beat too long. Dad, listen. Michael cleared his throat. We've had a change of plans. Jessica's parents decided to drive up from Atlanta after all, and they're bringing her sister's family too. It's going to be pretty crowded. I felt something cold settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the winter chill outside. That's fine, I said quickly. I don't mind a crowd. I can bring extra potatoes. It's not just that, Michael cut in. The kids have been really excited about doing Christmas with Jessica's family traditions this year. You know how they are with their cousins. And Jessica's been planning this dinner for weeks. I watched a cardinal land on my bird feeder, its red feathers bright against the snow. Sarah had loved cardinals. She'd always said they were Christmas birds. I can just come for dessert then, I offered, hating the pleading note in my voice. I won't stay long. I just want to see the kids open the presents. Dad. His voice hardened. Don't come. You'll ruin everything. We'll do our thing with you after the holidays, okay? Maybe New Year's weekend. The cardinal flew away, startled by something I couldn't see. Michael, it's Christmas. I haven't missed Christmas with you and the kids since Mom died, I know. But things change, Dad. The kids are growing up. They want to do different things. Jessica and I want to do different things. He sighed heavily. Look, I've got to go. Jessica needs help with the decorations. I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stood there holding my phone, staring at the darkening sky. The snow was falling harder now, blurring the colored lights outside. The house felt suddenly larger, emptier than it had moments before. I walked slowly to the dining room and looked at the carefully arranged table, 4-place settings, though it had just been 3 since Sarah passed. I'd added the 4th this year for Jessica, thinking it was time to make more of an effort with my daughter-in-law. The crystal water glasses caught the light from the chandelier, sending little rainbows across the white tablecloth. One by one, I removed the plates, the silverware, the glasses. Each piece went back into its proper place in the china cabinet. I folded the tablecloth with care and returned it to the drawer. Then I went to the kitchen and wrapped the prime rib, placing it in the freezer next to the apple pie I'd baked yesterday. 43 years of working 60-hour weeks to provide for my family. 43 years of Little League games and science fairs and graduation ceremonies. 43 years of building a life, a home, a family, only to be told not to come for Christmas because I would ruin everything. Something shifted inside me then, as I closed the freezer door. Not anger, exactly. Something colder, more resolved. I went to my office and sat at the desk. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a thick folder labeled Family Financial Records. Inside were documents I'd gathered over the past 2 years, ever since I'd first noticed the discrepancies in my accounts, the strange new investments, the paperwork I supposedly signed but had no memory of signing. I spread the papers across my desk and began to read through them again, taking careful notes. The college funds I'd established for my grandchildren, now mysteriously transferred to more aggressive investments. The power of attorney document with a signature that looked like mine but wasn't. The second mortgage taken out on this house, the house that was fully paid off 15 years ago, with the proceeds deposited into an account I couldn't access. My son's name was on everything. As night fell and the snow continued to blanket the world outside, I made a decision. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I'd saved months ago but hadn't found the courage to call. Moretti and Associates, this is Rachel. How can I help you? The answering service picked up despite the holiday. This is William Harmon, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need to speak with James Moretti about a potential case. It's regarding financial exploitation by a family member. I understand, Mr. Harmon. Attorney Moretti is out of the office until December 27th, but I can have him call you first thing when he returns. Is this an emergency situation? I looked at the documents spread before me, at the proof of my son's betrayal, at the wreckage of the trust I'd placed in him. No, I said quietly. It's been happening for a long time. A few more days won't matter. After arranging for the call, I gathered the documents and returned them to their folder. Then I went to the kitchen and poured myself 2 fingers of the Macallan 18 that Sarah and I had always saved for special occasions. I carried the glass to the living room and sat in my recliner, looking at the small Christmas tree in the corner. There were presents underneath it, gifts for Michael, for Jessica, for my grandchildren Emma and Jacob. I raised my glass in a silent toast to Sarah's picture on the mantel. Merry Christmas, my love, I whispered. I think it's time for some changes around here. I sat in the quiet of my empty house, sipping my scotch, and began to plan. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual, a slow erosion of truth and trust, so subtle you can almost convince yourself you're imagining things. It started 2 years after Sarah died. Small things at first, Michael suggesting I was forgetting conversations we'd had about my finances, investment decisions I supposedly approved but couldn't recall. He'd show me paperwork with what looked like my signature, and I'd think maybe I was just getting old, maybe my memory wasn't what it used to be. Dad, we talked about this, he'd say with that patronizing patience. You agreed it made sense to consolidate your accounts with mine. It's easier for me to help you manage everything that way. And I wanted to believe him. He was my son, Sarah's boy. The accounting degree, the MBA, the corner office at the investment firm. We'd sacrificed so much to give him those opportunities. Why wouldn't I trust him? But then came the day I tried to withdraw money to buy Emma a laptop for her birthday. The teller's puzzled expression, the quiet conversation with the manager, the embarrassment of being told I didn't have access to my own savings without my son's approval. There must be some mistake, I'd said, my face burning as people in line behind me shifted impatiently. I'm sorry, Mr. Harmon, the manager explained quietly. According to our records, your son has financial power of attorney. We can't release funds without his authorization. I never told Michael about that day. Instead, I started paying attention. I requested copies of all my financial statements. I began keeping a journal, documenting every conversation, every strange occurrence. And slowly, the truth emerged like a photograph developing in darkroom chemicals. My son was systematically stealing from me. The retirement fund I'd built over 40 years working at the steel mill, the money from selling the vacation cabin Sarah and I had loved, the life insurance payout after her death, all of it funneled into accounts I couldn't access. My house, the home where I'd raised my family, where Sarah had taken her last breath, remortgaged without my knowledge, the equity extracted like marrow from bone. As I sat there on Christmas Eve, I wondered what Sarah would say if she could see what had become of our family. She'd always been the peacemaker, the one who believed in second chances. But she'd also been fiercely protective of what was right. He's your son, I could almost hear her saying. But that doesn't give him the right to steal your dignity along with your money. The grandfather clock in the hallway, another anniversary gift from Sarah, chimed 10 times. Outside, the snow had stopped falling, leaving the world hushed and pristine. I finished my scotch and set the glass aside, then reached for my phone and opened the photo gallery. There they were, Emma and Jacob at the lake last summer, their faces sunburned and happy as they showed me the fish they'd caught. Emma was 14 now, whip-smart and passionate about science like her grandmother had been. Jacob was 10, quieter, with an artist's eye that reminded me of my brother Thomas. They were good kids. My grandchildren. And they were being taught that their grandfather wasn't welcome on Christmas. I scrolled further back through the photos until I found what I was looking for, a picture of Michael and me at his college graduation. His arm was around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride. I remembered that day so clearly, the sacrifices that had led to it, the double shifts at the mill, the overtime on holidays, the vacation days I'd sold back to the company to help pay his tuition. "You'll never have to work as hard as I did, son," I told him that day. That was the whole point. Maybe that had been my first mistake. I put the phone down and stood up, my knees protesting after sitting too long. In the kitchen, I made myself a sandwich from the ham I'd bought for breakfast tomorrow, then ate it standing at the counter, looking out at the Christmas lights reflected in the snow. The house was too quiet. I turned on the radio, finding a station playing Christmas carols, and let Nat King Cole's smooth voice fill the empty spaces. Sarah and I had danced to these songs in this very kitchen, year after year, even when her legs grew weak from the chemo. By the time the clock struck 11, I had made up my mind. I went to the hallway closet and pulled out my heavy winter coat, a scarf, and gloves. I found my car keys and the small digital recorder I'd bought months ago but hadn't used yet. I slipped it into my pocket along with my phone. Before leaving, I paused at the mirror in the entryway. The face that looked back at me was weathered, lined with years of hard work and recent grief. But the eyes were clear and determined. Sarah had always said my eyes gave away everything I was thinking. Not anymore, I said to my reflection. I backed my Buick out of the garage carefully, mindful of the snow-covered driveway. The streets were nearly empty as I drove the familiar route to Michael's house in Oakwood Hills, the upscale neighborhood he'd moved to 3 years ago, around the same time my accounts had begun to show unexplained withdrawals. It was 11:40 p.m. when I parked a block away from his house, cutting the headlights as I pulled to the curb. From here, I could see the warm glow of lights through the windows, the elegant Christmas decorations that Jessica always insisted on. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive imports mostly, including the Tesla SUV that Michael had purchased last spring. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe it really was just a crowded family gathering where I wouldn't fit in. Maybe I was becoming the bitter old man I'd always sworn I wouldn't be. But then I remembered the documents in my office, the forged signatures, the emptied accounts. I remembered the teller's pitying look, the slow discovery of each new betrayal. I stepped out of my car into the cold night air and walked quietly toward the house. The snow muffled my footsteps as I approached, staying close to the line of decorative evergreens that bordered the property. Through the large bay window, I could see into the living room where a massive Christmas tree glittered with white lights and gold ornaments. There were people gathered around it, but not a crowd. Just Michael, Jessica, the kids, and another couple I recognized as Jessica's parents. No sister, no cousins. Just the family that had told me not to come because I would ruin everything. I moved closer, finding a spot near the side of the house where I could see through the dining room window. The table was set beautifully, with what looked like Jessica's grandmother's china, not a large holiday gathering, but an intimate family dinner. 6 place settings, not the crowd Michael had described. I felt the cold seeping through my boots as I stood there watching my family, my son, my daughter-in-law, my grandchildren, laughing and talking without me. The presents piled under their tree probably included ones from me, gifts I'd carefully chosen and wrapped weeks ago, delivered to their door by courier because Michael had said they wouldn't have time to stop by and pick them up. The grandfather clock in their foyer, the one I'd given them as a housewarming present, would be approaching midnight. Christmas Day. The first Christmas in my life that I would spend entirely alone. I reached into my pocket and turned on the digital recorder, then pulled out my phone. With cold fingers, I opened the camera app and began to take pictures through the window, evidence of the lie I'd been told, proof that there was no crowd, no sister's family from Atlanta, no reason I couldn't have been there except that they didn't want me. As the clock must have struck midnight inside, I watched Michael raise a glass and a toast. Jessica leaned against him, smiling, while Emma and Jacob looked on with excitement, surely eager for the moment when they could open their presents. I took one final picture, then turned and walked back to my car, the recorder still running in my pocket. "Merry Christmas," I whispered to no one as I drove away from my son's house, back toward my empty one. But I wasn't going home to wallow in self-pity. I was going home to continue building my case. Because now I knew with absolute certainty that the financial betrayal wasn't the only lie. And for the first time since Sarah died, I felt a sense of purpose flowing through me, replacing the hurt with something stronger. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a man with a plan. The digital clock on my dashboard clicked over to 12:01 a.m. Christmas Day. It was time for me to take back what was mine, my money, my home, and most importantly, my dignity. The days between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange haze of purpose and pain. Michael called on Christmas morning as promised, his voice cheerful as he described how much the kids had loved their presents from me. They were thrilled, Dad. You should have seen their faces. I bit back the words that threatened to spill out. I could have seen their faces if you hadn't lied to keep me away. Instead, I played along, asking about the presents, about Jessica's parents' visit, careful not to reveal what I knew. "So how was your Christmas?" he asked, almost as an afterthought. "Quiet," I said truthfully. "I had dinner with the Williamsons from next door." This was a lie, but a harmless one. In reality, I'd eaten the ham sandwich and gone to bed early, exhausted from the emotional toll of the night's discoveries. "That's good," Michael said, sounding relieved that I hadn't spent the holiday alone, or perhaps relieved that I wasn't making him feel guilty about it. "Listen, we're still on for New Year's weekend, right? Maybe Saturday around noon? You can see the kids then." "That sounds fine," I replied, my voice giving away nothing of the storm inside me. "I'm looking forward to it." After hanging up, I drove to the local office supply store and bought a new lockbox with a combination only I would know. Into it went all the financial documents I'd gathered, the journal I'd been keeping, and the digital recorder with the evidence from Christmas Eve. I added the memory card from my phone containing the photos I'd taken. Then I called James Moretti's office again, confirming my appointment for the 27th. Moretti turned out to be younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and the sharp eyes of someone who missed nothing. His office was modest but well appointed, with diplomas from Georgetown and Harvard on the walls alongside photographs of what I assumed were his wife and children. "Mr. Harmon," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Thank you for coming in. I understand from my assistant that you're dealing with a potential case of financial exploitation?" I nodded, setting my lockbox on the desk between us. "It's my son," I said, surprised at how steady my voice remained. "He's been systematically stealing from me for at least 2 years, possibly longer. I have documentation." If Moretti was shocked, he didn't show it. Instead, he nodded professionally and gestured toward the lockbox. "May I?" For the next 2 hours, we went through everything: the altered accounts, the forged signatures, the unauthorized power of attorney, the second mortgage. I played the recording from Christmas Eve, including Michael's call telling me not to come and my subsequent discovery of the lie. I showed him the photographs I'd taken through the window. Throughout it all, Moretti took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions but mostly just listening. When we finished, he closed his notebook and looked at me directly. "Mr. Harmon, I won't sugarcoat this. What you've shown me appears to be clear evidence of elder financial abuse, forgery, and fraud. Your son could be facing serious criminal charges in addition to civil liability." I felt a heaviness in my chest at his words, despite having known this was where things were heading. I don't necessarily want him to go to jail, I said quietly. He's still my son. I just want my money back, my house secured, and some kind of acknowledgement of what he's done. Moretti nodded thoughtfully. There may be a way to approach this that focuses on restitution rather than criminal penalties, at least initially. But Mr. Harmon, I have to ask, are you prepared for how this will affect your relationship with your son and his family? Once we take legal action, there's no going back. I thought about Emma and Jacob, about the possibility of losing my connection to my grandchildren. I thought about Sarah and what she would want me to do. Then I remembered Michael's cold dismissal on Christmas Eve, the casual cruelty of his lie, the years of systematic theft from his own father. The relationship is already broken, I said finally. I'm just the only one who's acknowledging it. And if I don't stand up for myself now, what example am I setting for my grandchildren? That it's okay to steal from family? That the elderly can be discarded and taken advantage of? Moretti gave me a small, approving nod. All right then. Here's what I propose we do. The plan was straightforward but methodical. First, we would document everything in file for an emergency revocation of the fraudulent power of attorney. Simultaneously, we would prepare a civil suit against Michael for the stolen funds. Moretti would work with a forensic accountant to trace exactly where my money had gone and how much was owed. We would also file a report with the Adult Protective Services and the District Attorney's Office, but with a request to hold off on criminal charges pending the outcome of the civil case. The threat of criminal prosecution often motivates settlement in these situations, Moretti explained. Most people like your son never expect to be caught, and when they are, they'll do almost anything to avoid jail time. And what about the house? I asked. The second mortgage? We'll file an emergency injunction to prevent any further encumbrance or sale of the property, and include the mortgage company in the civil suit for failing to properly verify your consent. They have liability here too, especially if we can prove the signature was forged. As I left Moretti's office that day, I felt lighter somehow, as if putting the burden of my son's betrayal into professional hands had lifted some of the weight from my shoulders. There was pain too, of course, a deep, throbbing ache at the knowledge that my own child had systematically stolen from me while pretending to help me. But beneath the pain was something else, resolve. On New Year's Eve, I received a text from Michael canceling our planned visit for the weekend. Sorry, Dad, something came up with work. Need to fly to Chicago for an emergency meeting. Rain check? I stared at the message for a long time, wondering if it was another lie or if the universe was simply making it easier for me to proceed with my plan without having to face him first. Either way, it was a relief not to have to pretend everything was normal while Moretti's team was already filing the initial paperwork. No problem, I texted back. Let me know when you're free. That night, as the world celebrated the coming of a new year, I sat in my living room with a single glass of champagne and made a toast to Sarah's picture. This isn't how we thought our golden years would go, is it, love? I said to her smiling image. But I'm going to fix it. I promise you that. Outside, fireworks burst in the night sky, their bright explosions visible through my window. Neighbors shouted Happy New Year to each other in the street. Somewhere in another house, in another part of town, my son was probably celebrating too, unaware that his carefully constructed scheme was about to come crashing down around him. I raised my glass higher. To justice, I whispered. And to new beginnings. It took 3 weeks for the legal machinery to grind into motion. 3 weeks of careful preparation, of gathering additional evidence, of Moretti and his team building an airtight case. During that time, I spoke to Michael twice on the phone, brief conversations where he explained he was swamped with work, where he promised to reschedule our visit soon. I played along, giving no indication of what was coming. On a cold Tuesday in late January, Michael received the first legal notifications, the emergency revocation of power of attorney, the temporary freeze on all accounts where my funds had been transferred, the civil complaint outlining the fraud and financial exploitation, and the notice of the pending criminal investigation that was currently on hold. He called me immediately, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "What the hell is this, Dad? Is this some kind of joke?" "It's not a joke, Michael," I said calmly. "It's accountability." "Accountability," he sputtered. "You're suing me? Your own son? After everything I've done for you?" I felt a surge of anger at his audacity. "Everything you've done for me? You mean stealing my retirement fund? Forging my signature on a second mortgage for my paid-off house? Taking the money Sarah and I worked our entire lives for? That's not, I was helping you manage your finances. You're getting confused in your old age. You agreed to all of this. Did I agree to be told not to come for Christmas because it would ruin everything? Did I agree to be lied to about a crowd of people who didn't exist? Did I agree to be shut out of my grandchildren's lives while you stole their college funds?" There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. "How did you," he began, then stopped abruptly. "You were at the house on Christmas Eve. You were spying on us." "Yes," I admitted. "After you lied to me, I wanted to see the truth for myself. And I did." "This is insane," he hissed. "You can't do this to me. Do you have any idea what this will do to my career? To my reputation? To the kids?" "I've thought about nothing else for weeks," I said truthfully. "But this isn't something I'm doing to you, Michael. This is something you did to yourself when you decided to steal from your own father." "I'm calling my lawyer," he snapped. "This isn't over." "I would expect nothing less," I replied. "And you're right about one thing, it isn't over. It's just beginning." After he hung up, I sat down heavily on the couch, my hands trembling slightly. It had been easier than I expected to stand my ground, but the aftermath left me feeling hollow. This was my son, the baby boy I'd held in my arms, the child I'd taught to ride a bike, the young man I'd helped move into his college dorm. Now we were adversaries in a legal battle that would likely destroy whatever remained of our relationship. But there was no turning back now. The machinery of justice, once set in motion, would follow its course. The next few days brought a flurry of legal maneuvers. Michael's attorney, a slick corporate lawyer from his firm, filed motions to dismiss, claiming I had consented to all the financial arrangements and was now suffering from cognitive decline that affected my memory and judgment. Moretti had anticipated this. At his recommendation, I underwent a comprehensive cognitive assessment with a geriatric neuropsychologist, who found no evidence of dementia or impairment. The evaluation was added to our evidence file, along with statements from my regular physician confirming my mental competence. The court denied the motion to dismiss and upheld the emergency injunctions. The accounts remained frozen. The investigation continued. Then came the call I'd been dreading. "Grandpa?" Emma's voice was small and confused on the phone. "Why are you suing Dad?" My heart clenched. I'd hoped the children could be shielded from this, at least initially, but I should have known better. Michael would use every weapon available to him, including his own children. "Emma, honey," I said gently. "This is complicated adult stuff that shouldn't involve you." "Dad says you're confused and making things up," she pressed on. "He says you're trying to hurt our family because you're lonely and bitter since Grandma died." The calculated cruelty of using my granddaughter this way made my blood boil, but I kept my voice calm. "Emma, I love you and Jacob very much. And I loved your grandmother more than anything in this world. What's happening between your dad and me is about some very serious financial matters. It's not about being lonely or bitter. Then why can't you just talk to Dad instead of getting lawyers involved? He's really upset." I closed my eyes, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes when adults have very serious disagreements about important things like money, they need help from professionals to sort it out fairly. That's what the lawyers are for. "So you're not trying to send Dad to jail?" My stomach dropped. "Who told you that?" "I heard Mom and Dad talking." Mom was crying. She said you were trying to destroy our family and send Dad to prison. I gripped the phone tighter. Emma, listen to me. I don't want to hurt your family. This is about making sure your dad returns money that doesn't belong to him. That's all. There was a long pause. I don't know who to believe, she finally said, her voice small. I understand, sweetheart. That's a terrible position to be in. But I want you to know that no matter what happens with this legal stuff, I will always love you and Jacob. Nothing can ever change that. After we hung up, I called Moretti immediately and told him about the conversation. They're using the children as emotional leverage, I said, still shaking with anger. Michael had Emma call me to try to guilt me into dropping the case. Moretti's voice was grim. Unfortunately, that's not uncommon in family financial exploitation cases. The perpetrator often tries to isolate the victim or turn other family members against them. We should document this. It shows consciousness of guilt and willingness to manipulate family members, including minors. What do I do if the kids call again? Be honest but age appropriate, just as you were with Emma. Don't disparage their father, but don't back down from the truth either. And Mr. Harmon? Yes? Stay strong. This is exactly why cases like yours often go unreported. The emotional manipulation can be just as damaging as the financial abuse. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure intensified. Jessica's parents called, begging me to reconsider what I was doing to their daughter's family. Old friends from the neighborhood reached out, concerned about the rumors they'd heard. Even my brother Thomas called from Arizona, asking if I was sure I knew what I was doing. Michael says you've been acting erratic since Sarah died, he said cautiously. That you're making accusations because you're depressed and isolated. Do I sound erratic to you, Thomas? I asked calmly. No, he admitted after a pause. You sound like the same stubborn older brother you've always been. Then trust that I know what I'm doing. I have evidence, Thomas. Hard evidence. Bank statements, forged documents, unauthorized transfers. This isn't a misunderstanding or a grudge. It's theft, plain and simple. Thomas was quiet for a moment. He's your son, Bill. Yes, I agreed heavily. And that's what makes this necessary. Because if I don't hold him accountable, who will? What lesson does he learn? That it's okay to steal as long as it's from family? That the elderly are fair game for exploitation? Is that the legacy I want to leave? In the end, Thomas promised to support whatever decision I made, though I could hear the reservation in his voice. It was one more small wound in a growing collection, one more relationship strained by Michael's actions and my response to them. But I remained resolute. The forensic accountant had completed his analysis, tracing over $870,000 that had been diverted from my accounts over the past 3 years. Some had gone to pay for Michael's house in Oakwood Hills, some into investment accounts in his name only, some simply spent on luxury items, the Tesla, a boat, expensive vacations, Jessica's jewelry. The second mortgage on my house, $340,000 that I never saw a penny of, had been used as a down payment on a vacation property in the Poconos that was titled solely in Michael and Jessica's names. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Even Michael's attorney was beginning to make noises about a possible settlement. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Saturday afternoon in early February. I was in the garden, clearing away dead branches from the rosebushes Sarah had loved so much, when a sleek black car pulled into my driveway. I didn't recognize the vehicle, but I instantly recognized the woman who stepped out of it. Jessica. She was dressed impeccably as always, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her expression tense. I set down my garden shears and walked toward her, wiping my hands on my work pants. Jessica, I said neutrally. This is unexpected. William. She rarely called me anything, avoiding both Dad and my first name whenever possible. We need to talk. I gestured toward the house. Come in. In the kitchen, I washed my hands while Jessica stood awkwardly by the table, declining my offer of coffee or tea. When I finally sat down across from her, she remained standing, her designer handbag clutched tightly against her side. Michael doesn't know I'm here, she said abruptly. That got my attention. All right. This has to stop, she continued, her voice tight. This lawsuit, the investigations, all of it. It's destroying our family. I'm aware of the strain, I replied carefully. But the situation was created by Michael's actions, not my response to them. Do you have any idea what this is doing to the kids? To Emma? She's not sleeping. Her grades are slipping. She's asking questions we don't know how to answer. I felt a pang of guilt, but pushed it aside. I'm sorry the children are caught in the middle. That was never my intention. Then drop the lawsuit, Jessica said, leaning forward intently. We can work something out privately, as a family. Michael will pay you back over time. Why would I trust that arrangement when he's been systematically stealing from me for years? Jessica's perfect composure slipped slightly, a flash of anger crossing her face. It wasn't stealing. It was investing. Managing your assets. Without my knowledge or consent. Creating a fraudulent power of attorney? Taking out a mortgage on my house and using it to buy a vacation home I don't even have access to? That's not management, Jessica. It's theft. She straightened, adjusting her cashmere sweater with manicured hands. Michael was trying to grow your wealth, to make sure you were taken care of. Maybe he got overzealous in his methods, but his intentions were good. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Overzealous? Is that what we're calling fraud these days? You're being deliberately difficult, she snapped, her facade cracking further. We're offering you a way out of this mess, a way to preserve what's left of this family. No, I said firmly. You're offering me a way for Michael to avoid consequences, while keeping most of what he stole. That's not the same thing. Jessica's expression hardened. You know what your problem is, William? You've always been rigid, inflexible. Sarah used to talk about it, how you saw everything in black and white, how you could never bend, even when bending would have made everyone's lives easier. The mention of my late wife's name in this context felt like a physical blow. Don't you dare bring Sarah into this, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. She would be heartbroken to see what her son has become. What he's become is successful. Jessica shot back. More successful than you ever were. While you were working your blue-collar job at the mill, living in this modest house, Michael was building something real. Something significant. He has a reputation in this community, a future that you're threatening with this vindictive lawsuit. And there it was, the truth beneath the polished exterior, the real reason for her visit. Not concern for the children's well-being, not even concern for Michael, but concern for their social standing, their reputation, their lifestyle built on stolen money. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 70 years. Jessica, I worked that blue-collar job for 43 years to put Michael through college, to give him opportunities one never had, to build the foundation for the success you're so proud of. This modest house is where I raised my family, where I cared for my wife until cancer took her, where I built a life of honesty and hard work. I won't apologize for any of that. I took a breath, steadying myself. And I won't drop this lawsuit. Not because I'm rigid or vindictive, but because what Michael did was wrong. Morally wrong. Legally wrong. And if you can't see that, then Sarah would be heartbroken about you too. Jessica's face flushed with anger. She grabbed her handbag and stepped toward the door, then paused, turning back to face me. You'll regret this, she said coldly. When you're sitting alone in this house, estranged from your son and grandchildren, you'll wish you had taken the olive branch I offered today. No, I replied with quiet certainty. I'll regret many things in my life, Jessica. But standing up for what's right won't be one of them. After she left, I called Moretti and told him about the encounter. "This is actually good news," he said when I finished. "They're getting desperate. The offer to work something out privately is an admission that they know they're in trouble legally." "Maybe," I agreed. "But Jessica's right about one thing: this is tearing the family apart." "Mr. Harmon," Moretti said gently, "with all due respect, your son tore the family apart when he decided to steal from you. You're just refusing to pretend it didn't happen." I knew he was right, but that didn't make the reality any easier to bear. That night, I looked through old photo albums, pictures of Michael as a baby, as a little boy proudly showing off his first bicycle, as a teenager in his baseball uniform, as a young man in his graduation gown. In every photo, his smile was open and genuine, his eyes bright with possibility. Where had that boy gone? At what point had he looked at his aging father and seen not the man who had sacrificed everything for him, but a resource to be exploited, an obstacle to be managed? I closed the album and put it away, unable to reconcile the son I had raised with the man who had betrayed me so completely. 3 days later, Moretti called with news. Michael's attorney had reached out to discuss settlement terms. "They're finally ready to negotiate," Moretti said, the satisfaction evident in his voice. The forensic accounting report was the tipping point. There's no way they can argue their way out of those numbers. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I just felt tired. "What are they offering?" "Full restitution of the $870,000, removal of the second mortgage on your house, and transfer of the Poconos property to your name. In exchange, we drop the civil suit and agree not to pursue criminal charges." It was more than I had expected. "What's the catch?" "They want a non-disclosure agreement. No one can ever know the terms of the settlement or the nature of the original complaint. And they want you to sign a statement that there was a misunderstanding about the financial arrangements, not fraud or theft." I considered this carefully. So Michael gets to save face. No one ever knows what he did. That's the idea, Moretti confirmed. From a purely financial perspective, it's an excellent offer. You get everything back, plus the vacation property. From an emotional or moral perspective, well, that's for you to decide. I told him I needed time to think about it. That night, I sat in Sarah's favorite chair by the window, watching the snow fall gently in the backyard, trying to imagine what she would advise me to do. The money wasn't really the point anymore. It never had been, not entirely. What Michael had stolen went beyond dollars and cents. He had stolen my trust, my place in my grandchildren's lives, my dignity. Could I accept a settlement that erased all of that, that allowed him to continue presenting himself to the world as a loving, dutiful son while I silently carried the knowledge of his betrayal? But what was the alternative? A protracted legal battle that would further traumatize Emma and Jacob? The public humiliation of Michael, which would inevitably splash back onto his children? The permanent destruction of any hope for eventual reconciliation? As I sat there in the quiet of my home, Sarah's presence seemed to fill the empty spaces. I could almost hear her practical voice, her compassionate wisdom. "The money matters, Bill," she would have said. "It's our life's work, our security, our legacy for the grandkids. But it's not worth destroying what's left of the family. Take the settlement, but find a way to make sure Michael understands the real cost of what he's done." By morning, I had made my decision. I called Moretti and told him to proceed with the settlement negotiations, but with one critical modification. "I'll sign the NDA and the statement about a misunderstanding," I said. "But I want a private letter of acknowledgement and apology from Michael, admitting exactly what he did and why it was wrong. Not for legal purposes, this won't be part of the official settlement. It's between him and me. Do you think he'll agree to that?" Moretti asked skeptically. "If he wants this to go away as badly as Jessica indicated, yes. And make it clear, I don't need the letter to show anyone else. I need it for myself, and for any possibility of rebuilding a relationship in the future." Moretti was silent for a moment. "I'll convey the terms," he finally said. "And Mr. Harmon?" "For what it's worth, I think you're making a wise choice." 2 days later, Michael agreed to my conditions. The paperwork was drawn up, the transfers arranged, the mortgage cancellation prepared. The final signing was scheduled for the following Monday at Moretti's office. When the day arrived, I dressed carefully in my best suit, the one I'd worn to Sarah's funeral, freshly dry cleaned for the occasion. I wanted to face my son with dignity, to show him that despite everything, I was still the father who had taught him about integrity and responsibility, even if those lessons hadn't taken root as deeply as I'd hoped. The weather matched my mood, gray and cold, with a light drizzle that seemed to blur the edges of the world. I drove to Moretti's office slowly, rehearsing in my mind what I would say when I saw Michael for the first time since this began. But when I arrived, I discovered that Michael wouldn't be attending in person. His attorney would handle the signing on his behalf. "He's traveling for business," the attorney explained smoothly, not needing my eyes. "But he's authorized me to complete the settlement on his terms, including the personal letter you requested." I felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. Part of me had wanted to look my son in the eye as this chapter closed, but another part was grateful to be spared the emotional confrontation. The signing itself was anticlimactic, a series of documents pushed across the table, explanations of legal terms, the scratch of pens on paper. Through it all, Michael's attorney maintained a professional detachment, as if this were a routine business transaction rather than the formal recognition of a profound betrayal. When we finished, he handed me a sealed envelope. "The personal letter you requested, Mr. Harmon." I took it without opening it, tucking it carefully into my inside jacket pocket, next to my heart. "Thank you," I said simply. As I walked out of Moretti's office, legally whole again but emotionally drained, the rain had stopped and weak sunlight was breaking through the clouds. I stood on the steps for a moment, feeling the weight of the envelope against my chest, wondering what words my son had chosen to acknowledge his actions. I didn't read the letter immediately. Instead, I drove to Sarah's grave, something I hadn't done in several months. The cemetery was quiet on the dreary Monday afternoon, with only a groundskeeper visible in the distance. I made my way carefully along the familiar path to her headstone, a simple granite marker with her name, the dates of her birth and death, and the words "beloved wife, mother, and grandmother" carved beneath. I sat on the small bench we'd placed there, brushing away a few dead leaves. "It's over, Sarah," I said quietly. "At least the legal part. The rest, well, that will take longer." The envelope seemed to grow heavier in my pocket. With a deep breath, I removed it and broke the seal, unfolding the single sheet of expensive stationery inside. "Dear Dad," it began in Michael's precise handwriting. I read slowly, absorbing each word, each sentence. There was acknowledgement of the fraud, the theft, the betrayal, laid out in stark, unambiguous terms. There was an explanation, not a justification, but a glimpse into the mindset that had led him down this path. Financial pressures I hadn't known about. Gambling debts. A lifestyle he couldn't actually afford. The easy rationalization that he would pay it all back before I ever noticed. And then the apology. Not the polished, lawyer-crafted statement I had half expected, but something raw and real. Words of genuine remorse, of shame, of regret. An understanding, finally, of the damage he had done not just financially, but to our relationship, to the trust between us, to his own integrity. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote toward the end. "I'm not sure I deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand now what I've done, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be the man you raised me to be, the father you were to me, the grandfather you are to my children. If there's ever a chance to rebuild what I've broken, I hope you'll let me try." He had signed it simply, "Your son, Michael." I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope, then sat in silence beside Sarah's grave, tears mingling with the raindrops on my face. They weren't tears of joy or sorrow, but something more complex, relief, perhaps, that somewhere inside the man who had betrayed me so completely, there still existed the son I had raised and loved. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. That would take time, and proof through actions, not just words on paper. But it was a beginning, a small crack in the wall of pain and betrayal that had grown between us. As I finally stood to leave, I placed my hand on Sarah's headstone, feeling the cold, wet granite beneath my fingers. "I did what you would have wanted," I told her. I stood up for myself, but I left the door open for healing. The wind rustled through the trees overhead, sending a shower of raindrops down around me. In that moment, I could almost feel Sarah's presence, her practical wisdom, her boundless capacity for both justice and mercy. I walked back to my car, the letter secure in my pocket, the future uncertain but no longer shrouded in betrayal and deception. The settlement money would be transferred within days. The second mortgage would be cancelled. The vacation property would be mine, though what I would do with it, I had no idea. But the most valuable thing I had reclaimed wasn't measured in dollars or property deeds. It was my dignity, my self-respect, my refusal to be a victim. And perhaps, someday, there would be a reconciliation, a rebuilding of the family that had been fractured by greed and deception. As I drove home through the clearing weather, I thought about Emma and Jacob, about the legacy I wanted to leave them beyond the financial inheritance that was now secure again. I wanted them to remember a grandfather who stood for something, who taught them through his actions that integrity matters, that family doesn't mean allowing yourself to be exploited, that love sometimes requires difficult truths and painful consequences. The future would unfold as it would. Michael would either demonstrate through his actions that his remorse was genuine, or he wouldn't. The grandchildren would either grow to understand what had really happened, or they would accept the sanitized version their parents might present. But I had done what needed to be done. I had reclaimed what was mine, my money, my home, and most importantly, my dignity. And in doing so, I had honored Sarah's memory and the life we had built together. As I pulled into my driveway, the sun broke fully through the clouds, illuminating the house Sarah and I had shared for 40 years. It wasn't a mansion in Oakwood Hills. It didn't have the prestige or the luxury that Michael and Jessica seemed to crave. But it was mine, honestly earned through decades of hard work. And now it was truly secure again, both legally and emotionally. I walked up the front steps, feeling lighter than I had in months, perhaps years. The burden of betrayal hadn't completely lifted, it might never fully disappear, but it had shifted, become manageable. I was no longer carrying it alone. Inside, I placed Michael's letter in Sarah's jewelry box, alongside the cards and mementos I had kept from our life together. Whatever happened next, this chapter was closed. Justice had been served, not through vengeance or public humiliation, but through accountability and the chance for genuine redemption. I moved through the rooms of my house, touching familiar objects, feeling Sarah's presence in the home we had built together. For the first time since her death, the future didn't seem like an empty landscape to be endured. There were possibilities again, chances for healing, for new beginnings. On the mantel, I straightened the photograph of Sarah and me on our 40th anniversary, both of us gray-haired but smiling, our eyes still bright with love and shared purpose. Beside it stood pictures of Emma and Jacob at various ages, their faces reminding me of what remained valuable and worth fighting for. "We did it, love," I whispered to Sarah's image. "We protected what we built. And maybe, someday, we'll heal what's been broken too." Outside, the day continued to brighten, the storm clouds giving way to clear blue sky. Spring wasn't far off now, a season of renewal, of growth, of second chances. I was ready for whatever came next. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.